of the greatest of all questions is, what comes after death? After all, each of us exists for just a flicker of a moment in a vast universe that seems infinite.
Belief in life after death has been a cornerstone of many cultures for thousands of years. Is there a heaven, as my faith teaches me? Or do we reincarnate, as the Hindus believe?
Or, after death, are we annihilated? Do we cease to have any existence at all? Physicist Stephen Hawking, an expert on black holes, declared that a supreme being is not necessary for the universe or life to have come into being, and that life is only a molecular accident. He said he's concluded that there is no afterlife, and that tales of an afterlife are fictions, invented to reduce our fear of dying.
What do we know about the afterlife? Well, nothing. No one's ever been and come back, at least that we know of, at least by the standards of science. And so from a scientist's perspective, it's just the great unknown. No different really than where were you before you were born.
It never happens. No one will ever die. It won't happen. And how I know that? September the 17th at 7:05 p.m. in 1975, I was struck by lightning. Somewhere around dead for 28 minutes, completely paralyzed for 6 days, partially paralyzed for 7 months, 2 years learning to walk and feed myself. And a lot of time to think about an event that occurred on that September afternoon.
From my standpoint, the evidence for afterlife is massive. There are so many sources.
We have a wide variety of evidence for strange phenomena, ESP, ghosts.
More than a dozen sources of evidence from the ancient mystical traditions, the Old and New Testament.
Near-death experiences.
Past life therapy.
Sometimes something really bizarre happens to us that reshapes our thinking. At least focuses our attention towards something we hadn't thought about before. I was presented with just that kind of mystery. I came into the room March 18th. It was the evening. I think it was probably around 8:30. At night, I printed out my daily log, phone calls, business meetings, a document I was going to need for going over my taxes, and started the printer, left it to run while I headed out to the casino where I lost about $100. When I came back, I collected the document. It was fine, nothing unusual. The ink was dry. Like always on these quick trips to Santa Fe, I had the house to myself. Nobody there but me. My eyes fell on the document, and it was different. A line had been blacked out. Some sort of ink. It was moist. It was still wet. It was exactly covering one line of the document. Well, this was really strange. This wasn't just some sort of ink smear. First of all, I'd seen the document very clearly when I brought it into the bedroom. There was no ink blot on the first page. I had to refer to the computer file to determine what the missing words were. It was a name, Joe Amodi, and the name didn't mean much to me. Yes, I'd had a conversation with him once, suggested some business that never happened. That was it. Why those words?
I wrote one book about afterlife, which I almost didn't finish because I thought, well, nobody's going to be interested in this, but fortunately I finished it, and a lot of people were interested. I've had people come up to me now and say, my mother was terrified of dying. She had cancer or something, and your book changed her entire attitude, and that's the best thing any writer can ever hear. It's called What Dreams May Come, and the premise of the entire book is that afterlife is a personal experience, and there's no such thing as hell. I don't believe in hell. My wife said after her mother died, her mother came to her in her dream and talked to her. That would be a perfect way to people in afterlife to contact those people that are left behind, because when we dream, we're using an aspect of our mind that is a higher consciousness than what we use in the daytime.
So I deliberately didn't touch it. I didn't want anything for my fingers to go off on it, and it was wet. And I held it. And actually, my cell phone, which was over on the coffee table, rang while I was, at that moment, it was my wife calling from Los Angeles. I picked it up, and I carried on a conversation with her for a couple minutes while staring at this thing, not mentioning a thing of what was going on. She wouldn't have possibly understood. You can't explain this to someone over the phone. It dried in a few minutes, but it took that long to dry. And when it dried, what was very strange was that across these deleted 4 words, the first 2 words, which are spoke to, it was like 80% deleted. But these next 2 words were completely blacked out. It was another level of blackout. I thought about the last couple of weeks and what might have happened that could have had some influence on this. I had participated in a grand tribute for the dear departed Forrest J. Ackerman, who had been a mentor to me and many others in the film business. One of Forrest J. Ackerman's claims to fame, editor-in-chief of Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine since 1958, editing nearly 200 issues of the world's first movie monster magazine. I had been one of the speakers at the tribute.
Our next speaker went from fan to filmmaker, responsible for several feature films and award-winning documentaries, including The Sci-Fi Boys, the Saturn Award-winning tribute to the original Backpack, Forey, Ray Bradbury, and Ray Harryhausen. Ladies and gentlemen, Paul Davids.
I, like the others who have spoken here today, loved Forey, still love him so dearly, like a father. He means so much to me. And there I had met 2 young Canadian filmmakers who had made a documentary about Forey Ackerman. Those 2 Canadian filmmakers had told me quite a story.
Right now, we're sitting at the Orange Drive Hostel, which used to be called the Orange Drive Manor. Mann's Chinese Theater is just right over here. Is it Mann's or Grumman? Grumman's, pardon me. And the Kodak Theater is there. So this is one of 2 sort of old-style mansions that, just north of Hollywood Boulevard. Franklin's right up here. And so this is the room that we were in when we were attending the Forey Memorial. And this is the exact spot where we were when Forey contacted us through our computers. December 2008, Forey died. Joe Moe, who was Forey's manservant, nurse, handler, best friend, invited us to the tribute for him at the Egyptian Theater. And so we came with the film to the tribute, but we had a day to kill beforehand. Now, keep in mind that Forey never believed in the afterlife. And that was something that, in my mind, stuck in my mind, because I thought, well, you're getting pretty close to the end of your life. You might want to reconsider this, So we went to Forey's grave. Now, this is at the Forest Lawn Cemetery. And so I walked up, and just for some reason, I wanted to see if the crypt was hollow, like if you could hear it. Hello? Uncle Forey!
That's watching, he probably has it rigged to go, who dares disturb the sleep of the vampire? What a guy.
And we came back to where we were staying. So I was posting on Blogspot, a Forey blog, and I was doing it through Facebook. When you do that, Facebook hauls up one of those random cryptographic things with all the squiggles so that spammers can't spam Facebook. Up pops Ackerman, capital A, 000. And I said, I can't believe this, I just saw Ackerman 000 show up.
And I went over, I took a look at it, and we were all kind of, it gets a little bit spooky, it's kind of a thing, and we were having a discussion about what it really meant.
Yeah. And I said, Ackerman reset, Ackerman new life, reboot.
Ackerman dead. And the minute we said the word dead, my computer, which I hadn't even touched yet, the screen was down. It was on, but it was down. Blurts out this in a childlike voice.
Oh my gosh, no way!
Yeah, that's it.
I didn't know what it was, but the thing that struck me as very strange was the fact that my computer screen wasn't up, so there's no reason my computer should be suddenly starting to talk to me, even if it is an ad. Very odd thing, and it was a childlike voice too, and I'll show you. The other thing that struck me at the time too is a childlike voice, and on my screensaver was a portrait of Forey at the age of 4.5, which is another little weird thing. So here's these two random kind of things that happen within 30 seconds of each other, which are completely inexplicable.
Within an hour of me rapping on Forey's grave.
That's the thing
which he would have loved.
Yeah, that's the thing that really sells it for me. Is like, how often do you go rap on somebody's grave? And then the incidents happen. It was like, you never rap on anybody's grave, and here we do this on a weekend when he's being memorialized, and we're at this old mansion and everything, and here it is, like he's saying, hey guys, you know, saying hello to us, you know, you guys knocked on my door, I'm just responding, right?
I visited the warehouse that housed the collection that was going to be auctioned from Forrest J. Ackerman estate. Extraordinary memorabilia from the entire history of science fiction, fantasy, and horror that he had amassed over his long lifetime of 92 years. The story of the Canadian filmmakers had intrigued me, puzzled me, baffled me. It was so close in time to what had happened to me, the ink blot.
My name is Forrest J. Ackerman. As I speak to you from the year 1970, I'm 53 years old. For 46 of those years, I've been seeing science fiction films. The first I ever saw was in 1926, The Lost World by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, his famous novel of the Brontosaurus alive today and loose in London.
On the question of my taking up this psychic matter, curiously enough, my first experiences in that direction were just about the time when Sherlock Holmes was being built up in my mind. That would be about the year 1886 and 1887. So nobody can say that I formed my opinions on psychic matters very hastily. Therefore, when people come along and contradict me, who have had no experience at all, read little, and perhaps never been to a seance, you can imagine that I don't take their opposition very seriously. When I talk on this subject, I'm not talking about what I believe. I'm not talking about what I think. I'm talking about what I know. There's an enormous difference, believe me, between believing a thing and knowing a thing. I'm talking about things that I've handled, that I've seen, that I've heard with my own ears. And I'll always, mind you, in the presence of witnesses.
See, the idea is that when you die, something continues beyond the physical body. And so presumably, whatever that is, it must have existed somewhere before the physical body was born. So basically, we have a long sleep before you're born and a long sleep after you're born, given that the universe is 13.7 billion years old and will continue for many billions of years more after we die. So to that extent, then, a scientist would want to know what's the substance or the energy or the medium or platform that carries your pattern of information that is you, that's different and unique from everybody else, into the future. What is that? And the answer is we have no evidence for any of that at all. It's just a great unknown. So as far as we know, there is no afterlife. We do know for a fact that weird things happen to people, all sorts of weird things, one-off events that just can't be explained. And so rather than going to the supernatural as the explanation, it's okay to just say, you know what, I don't know.
I'm Gary Schwartz. I'm a professor of psychology, medicine, neurology, psychiatry, and surgery at the University of Arizona, where I direct a laboratory for advances in consciousness and health. And this research integrates body, mind, and spirit. My academic background is that I obtained my PhD from Harvard University in 1971, and then I was on the faculty at Harvard for 5 years before I moved to Yale, where I was a professor of psychology and psychiatry and director of the Yale Psychophysiology Center. It turns out that contemporary science already has both the theory and the data that provides a mechanism for how energy and consciousness can not only continue after physical death, but continue to be present and interact with the physical world. And that comes from the basic understanding of how light and electromagnetic waves work. Because when we look up at a sky at night, what astrophysics tells us, as well as our own personal experience, is that we can see patterns of starlight from stars that have been traveling millions or billions of light years. And just like the light from distant stars continues in space long after the, quote, star has died, our light, our energy and information continues in the vacuum of space.
Beliefs about life after death differ depending upon one's culture. For the ancient Egyptians, when a worthy person died, a boat came to carry the soul to the next world, the boat of their sun god, Ra.
And for the ancient Greeks, the river Styx divided the world of the living and the dead. A ferryman came in a boat to take the departed souls to the underworld.
The boat is a powerful image for imagining our journey from this world to the next. Perhaps we need to imagine a different kind of vessel for transporting people to the afterlife today.
I began studying various aspects of what is often called the paranormal.
I have experienced apports in my life. An apport is an object that is dematerialized from one place and rematerialized in another. I had talked to a friend about hawks and what hawks mean in different kind of Native American symbology, and I was told that the hawk has to do with clear-sightedness. Now, in my office here, which I keep locked all the time, I had not been in for probably 3 or 4 days, and it had been locked. And one day when I came in, right in the middle of this table was this little hawk feather. No one had been in the room. No one had unlocked the room. This I took to be an apport. And apports can appear anywhere. Most people get them and don't realize. And it's usually an object that they may find in their home that they don't know how it got there. And it is in usually a very obvious place.
Some people believe that apports are gifts from the spirit world. And just as an object might strangely appear, it can also strangely vanish.
Was the obliterating ink on my document an apport? It just appeared. I heard apports were sometimes associated with unusual electromagnetic fields. I checked out my house. There's the mask. The mask is going off. The electric socket is not. The black sensor in my hand is what's actually taking the reading in milligauss. Look at this. The mask had been a gift of a friend of mine who had purchased it in Africa at an actual native ceremony in Zimbabwe.
And at that time, I was in the real estate business, and I'd bought a castle. And we hung the mask in a place of honor and prestige above the fireplace of the library.
It was very reminiscent of the kind of masks that Fari Ackerman loved. Had the mask attracted Fari's attention? Look at this. What more needs to be said? This mask does not have any electric wire running through it. There is no reason for it to be getting this electric charge. It is going off the meter.
Well, I've always thought of myself as a rational person, and I've been very, very careful over the years with my slides. I have about 25 carousels, and the only carousel that was missing pictures was the 1983 carousel with the African shots gone. The only mask picture I have is that picture on the fireplace. Okay, Papua New Guinea, totally secure. Spain, Portugal, Egypt, all these slides are in the carousel with the ring around. And Zimbabwe, here it is, August 83. There, completely empty. Absolutely, no ring, no pictures. All that was in these, in the carousel here. The mask, the dancing of the mask, Why this particular carousel? That's what makes this thing so curious. Only one carousel, missing all of the slides. Just this one. Strange.
In the years since I filmed Todd Mills speaking about those slides, they've never shown up. No clue, no explanation. Were the slides another apport?
Message for Forrest Ackerman after the beep. Doors open, 11 o'clock tomorrow, close at noon. Big White House, 2495 Glendale Avenue. I'll be working for you.
I've been making monsters more than half my life. Ever since I was 4 years old, I was creating monsters. Frankenstein, Dracula. I meet Forry Ackerman when I'm 4 years old. After my parents had read a newspaper article about the Acker Mansion, and they knew that I was interested in monsters. So my father took me over there one Saturday morning, and I met Forry for the first time. Had no concept about famous monsters, so my first experience with Forry was the man rather than the magazine. Mr. Science Fiction, Dr. Acula, a man who's created this amazing collection of over 300,000 things, of monsters, of aliens, of ghosts, of the paranormal. And he became my Uncle Forry. I loved him a great deal. Forrest J. Ackerman was an atheist. He never went to church, he never prayed. He didn't believe in reincarnation or the life beyond. And he felt that once his life on this planet was over, it was over. He didn't believe in heaven or hell or anywhere in between. He felt once he was done, he was done. But he had told Joe Mo towards the end of his life that he said, "Well, Joey, if I'm wrong, and there is a great convention in the sky, I'll come down and visit you. Don't forget my best pal, my son among nephews." You know. And we all took that as kind of a joke. Joe took it as a joke. We had known Forry and just knew him as a person that loved to tell jokes. So we didn't think too much of it. We just said, "Okay, Forry, you know, if you are wrong, come down and visit us. You know, we'll be here."
I followed the story of what became of Forrest J. Ackerman's 18-room Acker Mansion. The Acker Mansion was completely remodeled, and new tenants came in. Did you know anything about the history of the house when you moved in?
Other than this used to be a museum for like the old horror, films and such, but I didn't really look too much into it. I didn't know much about the background either.
Did you know who Forrest J. Ackerman was?
No. But I mean, I've had a few encounters, I guess you could say, and I mean, they weren't anything, they weren't, I guess you could say, scary or anything to disbelieve. I was kind of shocked more than anything.
Can you describe the first of those encounters?
It was like 2:30 at night, maybe about a month and a half ago, 2 months, and I was in my room. I came out to the kitchen, I turned the light on, and I seen a shadow on the wall. When I first noticed it, it looked like it was drifting off that way, so I thought it was someone at the bottom of the stairs. And I seen it followed this trace. Like when I walked in, this is kind of just the glimpse that I had that I was following.
Would it be like the shadow that's being cast right now in a way?
Yes, very similar.
This room had been Forrest J. Ackerman's office for over 20 years. From here, he had edited many issues of Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine. The room itself had been like a museum, crammed at every inch with memorabilia from the entire history of science fiction, fantasy, and horror, and now no trace of it except memories and perhaps the haunting of a shadowy figure moving across the wall in the middle of the night.
And it went down this way, like along this wall, and kind of just disappeared into here. So I originally thought that someone went into the bathroom, and the door was slightly ajar, it wasn't closed all the way. And I went in to scare my friend. I opened the door up and there was no one inside. And I checked, there's a bedroom off to the side here. I checked that room. I mean, there was absolutely no one down here at all.
Now my camera is inside Forry Ackerman's former office, pointing at the hall alongside it.
And this is where the music papers fell off every time I'd leave or go upstairs or go in the kitchen or something like that. I would set my music out, I would rehearse, I'd leave to the bathroom, come back, grab a glass of wine, anything I needed to do, I came back and then the papers were on the ground. I knew something was down here. I felt it. You feel things. That's it. It's not like I didn't see it. I just felt it. It could be the guy that owned the house or his wife, you know, if they love this house so much. They're probably around here somewhere.
I mean, he seems very friendly, and, you know, in my encounters, I guess you could say, with him, they've been, you know, calm. So I don't, you know, happy to share his house, I guess you could say.
Also, there were some strange things that happened in his home. The day John Hall passed, John Hall had been the owner of the home that Forey lived in on Glendower Avenue. And the day Mr. Hall passed, a picture of Mr. Hall in a performance of one of his films fell off the wall. It was the only picture in the house that fell off the wall.
If I was going to say something that Forey did for people, it was his enthusiasm. His enthusiasm was passed on to others because he was so excited about the genre that you can't help but be excited as well.
Forey always was such a giving, thoughtful person. He changed so many thousands of people's lives for the better, including mine. And he's magic in many ways. His sweet, intelligent, kind personality is immense creativity.
Stephen King sent one of his early stories in there. Forey once met Stephen King at a book signing, and he had that letter that little Stevie King wrote, and he handed it, would you mind autographing this for me, or do you recognize this? And King cracked up. You know, he said, Mom, because his mother was there, he says, Mom, this is Forey Ackerman, and this is one of the first stories I ever wrote.
And attempting to influence him to remake The Phantom of the Opera with myself as Lon Chaney, and if possible, to get Oprah to play the heroine and takes the mask off the monster. If this all comes true, you can watch for The Phantom of the Opera.
I had known him almost my entire life. I had met him when I was 14 at a science fiction convention in Washington, D.C. A year later, I was thrilled to receive a special delivery letter from him from Hollywood, informing me that I was one of the winners in the Famous Monsters amateur filmmaking contest. Forey chose the stamps carefully that he put on his envelopes. The stamps include one of Edgar Allan Poe and 4 stamps of the Palace of the Governors of Santa Fe, where the incident with the ink blot happened many decades later. I scoured the auction lots looking for archives about his life that I might be able to secure. I was also looking for a painting. Well, this is King Kong. That coffin was in his living room. Oh, jeez. And people would sit down on it. That was a bench.
Wow. Oh, really?
But it is a real coffin. That painting was painted in 2004. That's 4 years before he passed away.
The clock behind Forey is reading just a few minutes before midnight. It is a very strange coincidence that the very time on the clock that is depicted on this painting would, just a couple of years later, turn out to be, sure enough, exactly the time that he died. And then take that together with, you know, the silence gesture and the raven on the bookcase, you know, behind him. It is quite extraordinary.
I became curious about Forey Ackerman's editorial style. For example, what kind of notations did he use when he excised a phrase or marked out a word? I found some examples of articles that had the original editorial notations from Famous Monsters, and a couple of them really caught my eye. One in particular looked very much like my Blackout, but I wasn't sure whether that one had been done by Forey or perhaps by his publisher at that time, James Warren. So I put in a call to Joe Moe.
Paul was trying to describe to me the line on the piece of paper that had been obscured by the mysterious liquid. On the phone, he said, I don't understand. It said, spoke to Joe Amode, and then he hollered, Joe Moe!
And all of a sudden, the obvious hit me. Joe Amoti. The name Mo is contained within Amoti. The message spoke to Joe Mo.
I jumped. I didn't know what had happened. I thought maybe he put his hand on the stove.
It wasn't this line above that was blacked out that says left message for Joe Amoti. It was spoke to. And what Joe Mo confirmed for me was that after the tribute, he believes he had an extremely lucid dream.
I went to sleep and I had this vision, this dream, where Forey came to me into my bedroom. And he had this mischievous Forey smile on his face, and he looked like he was going to play this game he used to play where he held out both hands and he said, "Okay, pal, pick a hand." And you'd pick one, he'd say, "Here you go," and give you something. Then he'd say, "Too bad you didn't pick this one." But he'd give you both things anyway. And this occasion, he didn't play that game. He just sort of leaned in smugly and he said, "So, seen any good Hollywood tributes lately?" And I was really touched. I said, "Well, Forey, what did you think?" And he went, "Fair," which is totally his sarcasm. And, I said, "Did you like it?" He said, "Best tribute I've ever seen, the 9th wonder of the world." And that one really got to me because only Forey would have said that. He would have thought of the 7 ancient wonders of the world, pyramids and things like that. Then he would have remembered that King Kong was the 8th wonder of the world. So we could only possibly be the 9th wonder.
I remember they called the first one the 8th wonder of the world.
Some people would call it an apparition. It was a vivid dream to me, and I woke up and it was kind of disorienting because I was in the same setting, just as, I dreamt it, but no Forey, just little reminders and remnants of him and this real emotional memory that I'd had, of him visiting. I'm by nature a skeptic, the kind of skeptic that wants to believe but needs a certain amount of proof. And I guess that's kind of subjective because it's what's proof? It's whatever you decide is proof. But I got to admit the chronology of the timeline of things that happened was pretty weird. If you think about it, my Canadian friends Ian and Mike had visited Forey's crypt and knocked on the door and had these strange, phenomena happen to them.
Oh my God! No way!
Then I had this very vivid waking dream about Forey, which Paul Davids knew nothing about. So the fact that he had this strange message that he believes was sent to him with this ink blocking out a line that has this, spoke to Joe Amoti, which sort of has my name in it. And, if you know Forey, you gotta kind of put 2 and 2 together and realize that he did, wordplay was his whole life, and puns were his, the shoe that he used to wedge in the door to get into your, funny bone. And, well, you might say that was his M.O.
The rub here is that we're pattern-seeking primates. We're always looking for patterns to connect the dots in a way that nobody else has before. If you do, you discover something new. You win the Nobel Prize for discovering some particular structure of DNA, say, or the atom, or whatever. But you may also be making a false positive. You may think there's a pattern there that turns out it isn't real at all. And most of what people imagine turns out to be false patterns. Most of the ideas that people come up with turn out not to be true. So science is by nature conservative in that respect. It's not enough to just imagine the way things might be and publish a scientific paper. No, you actually have to have some experimental evidence for it before you get your paper published. Some data, some proof that what you say might be true.
With so many uncanny things happening, I decided it was time to begin a scientific investigation of the ink blot on my document. The chairman of the chemistry department at Indiana University agreed to begin the process with electron microscope analysis and gas chromatography.
So I'm Jay Siegel. I'm the chair of the chemistry department at Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis. I'm also the director of the forensic science program here. I've been a forensic scientist for my entire career, which is over 30 years. Used to work in a crime lab.
Rather than FedExing the document to you, I didn't want it to leave my possession. I have hand-delivered it to you, and this is the document in question.
Mm-hmm. Well, at this point, I think I'm going to leave it in the bag until I get some gloves on to look at it. But one of the things, again, that strikes me here is this is not a situation where somebody just a leak in the ceiling dripped something onto this document. That's absolutely for sure, because the obliteration is very neat. One of the areas of research that I've been most active in recent years has been the analysis of inks. When we do this kind of analysis, we have to do it on the paper on which it's printed because these are evidence. They can be evidence in criminal cases or civil cases. This is the ink in isopropyl alcohol that's under here now. It's starting to turn blue. The solution is starting to turn blue. You can't see it as well, but this is dissolving slowly. Actually, it looked a little more soluble than methyl alcohol, but this is definitely dissolving. You can see all the blue tinting around it on the paper. That's because it's now bleeding off the ink. Okay, if we go down here, that's the ink, the obliterating ink. And this was the stuff that completely obliterated. Okay? Nothing is happening. There's no solution taking place at all here.
It is not reacting to
It is not reacting to isopropyl just like it didn't react to methyl alcohol.
Dr. Siegel started out with the microscope. At first, they thought that maybe they saw some little paintbrush hairs, but it soon became clear that those were only paper fibers. They were struck by the uniformity of the darkness of the ink. The first look using the microscope wasn't going to tell them about the chemistry. Then they proceeded to gas chromatography, a very time-consuming lab process in which little samples of the ink from the paper were subjected to destructive tests in order to learn about the chemistry from the gas emitted at high temperatures. While the experiments were being conducted in those laboratories, some strange things happened that really captured my attention and the attention of the scientists.
Weird.
Did you guys mess with that computer over there?
Sorry?
Did you guys touch that over there?
Touch it? No.
It's kind of weird.
Why is it on?
And the program is open now?
It was open, yeah.
And we didn't do it.
No?
Dr. Siegel decided to call in reinforcements. He suggested that I fly to New Jersey to meet with one of his former colleagues, Dr. John Allison, who had agreed to conduct further experimentation, this time using mass spectrometry.
My name is John Allison. I was contacted by a good friend of mine, Jay Siegel, about this project. He and I worked together for several years at Michigan State University. If I just had a wet, soapy brush and I started here, there's no ink out here. So I wouldn't be able to create that, which extends out past the end of the line. Someone had either gone back and forth across this enough times to collect enough blue to make this final pass. The only other choice would have been if the printer did it, and the printer would have been deciding I'm putting a lot of ink here because I'm printing a line, but that can't be because it would not have been wet 2 hours later. And we decided that in the original document there was a space between Joe and Amodi, so we used a scalpel to remove that. That will give us a sample that has the most obliteration ink in it. I have a plate here where those three samples have been attached. So there's the number 24. There is the light blue.
That's like a control sample because that light blue did not happen.
Right, we made that using water.
Right.
Removed from the printer ink. And the third piece here is the obliteration material. Many of the wells are already loaded with different samples that we've studied. So you can put this into the instrument and then do 100 different experiments. Everything points to the material that comes from the printer ink. How it was created in such a uniform way, we haven't been able to reproduce that. We took some water and we pulled it across the printed document and got some of the blue that comes out of the printer ink. And the spectrum's essentially the same, 575, 456, 412, 368, 191.
And what about the 138, where it has a very high 138?
Yeah, it's a difference, right?
138 is a difference.
Right. And there's also a peak here at a different laser power that appears at 107. And I can tell you further what the peak at 107 is, because I've run into it in a number of unexpected places. The first time I ran into it was analyzing a page from the Quran from the 1600s. When they made black ink, they often used to put silver salts in, because when silver compounds touch paper, they turn black. there's silver in there, and this wasn't everywhere. It was just in some parts of that little sliver we took out.
There are aspects of this that are unexplained.
That's right. That's right. I don't know how to recreate this. I couldn't do it.
Because we've got silver in the obliterating ink, and we've got this molecule 138.
Right.
We do not have it in other places.
Right. There's some differences here, and the differences are all on the first page.
And it also doesn't tell us why the printer ink would have become so intense as to spread out in a way that absolutely obliterated the writing.
That's right. We don't know that. No, we have not come close to that. Nope. That is still a mystery. I mean, it's a pretty unique obliteration from a physical standpoint.
You've not seen that before?
No. A line was targeted.
Targeted?
Yeah.
If the line had been targeted, it meant it was deliberately selected. I could think of for no other reason than to get my attention.
In forensics, you try to find things you try to find explanations. And we usually don't resort to interactions or intervention from someone from beyond the grave. So there has to be a reasonable explanation. And
is it not reasonable that there could have been an interaction from another realm that we don't have access to?
I don't have any data on that.
Then in New Jersey, the scientists made an attempt to duplicate this. He filled like 12 pages with his attempts. He couldn't make it the same. Couldn't just use water or a solvent to come up with anything as dark as that. After we were done at his lab, we went back to his house where he could show me that something very strange happened.
This morning I had these printed and I put them on the chair so I would remember them when I was leaving the house. And went and got a shower and had breakfast, got dressed, and when I came back downstairs, it was sort of interesting that was what I had found, that they were all on the floor.
Grab a glass of wine, anything I need to do, I came back and then the papers were on the ground.
I make a point of tucking them. I do this all the time, and I tuck them under there just so I know.
Your bag was there?
My bag was there, yeah.
So they would have been slightly tucked under?
Right. Well, there's no window around this part of the dining room. There's no fan in the room. No.
They were out further.
Yeah, they were out further. Friday was just an incredible hot day. I could not get dry. That usually doesn't ring.
And he told me it had not chimed for years before that, and it hadn't chimed again since.
Wow.
Just while my camera was on, having him talk about this case. And regarding the strange fire alarm that went off when we were in the lab today.
We haven't had a fire alarm go off in 6 months, maybe. But we had one today.
The Alliance for Studying Paranormal Experiences heard about my research with the Chem Labs. They invited me to give a lecture about my experiences, and in particular the theory that the spirit of the late Forrest Ackerman might have somehow been the force behind these phenomena.
This man, Forrest J. Ackerman. I talked about his humor. This is important for understanding where the investigation led me. Wordplay, puns, jokester, trickster, mischievous soul. You could be very serious and he could just pull you out of it in an instant.
As a lifelong collector of famous monsters, I came across this pun, where he talks about working into the night and burning the midnight oil with a gorilla alongside him. And he says, let's keep this just amongst ourselves. Amongst, A-M-O, spoke to Joe Amodi, A-M-O. And then there's this one where the pun also shows up in a middle syllable of a word. The word spectacular. Ack was Fari's nickname. Everyone called him Ack. The name, the pun, again, in the middle syllable.
Here's one of the famous Monsters magazines where he signed something for me. Here's a close-up of what he signed. Look, it says, Fari says, hooray for Harryhausen and Paul Davids. Harryhausen's first name is Ray. Here's an example of where he has found a name within another word. He's taken the word hooray and used it to convey the name Ray. Like with spoke to Joe Amode, that he's got the word Amode, he found the word Mo in the middle of it. This is what it seemed like to me after knowing his sense of humor, that it's the kind of thing he would have done.
When I gave that lecture, I hadn't noticed that in the table of contents on that page where Fari signed, the first entry under Fang Mail says, "The invisible ink men strike again." What are the odds of that?
A recent edition of Fate magazine featured the art of Frank R. Paul. He was a science fiction artist in the 30s who did some really amazing work ahead of his time. And I became fascinated with him, and while doing the research on Frank R. Paul, I came across information that Forrest Ackerman was a supporter and a collector of his artwork. So it occurred to me that I should contact Paul Davids, who was, I knew, a fan of Forrest Ackerman.
Fari Ackerman was a foremost collector of the paintings of Frank R. Paul. In fact, he commissioned Paul to repaint a famous cover of Amazing Stories, putting himself, Fari Ackerman, as the main character in the picture. And Fari republished that as Amazing Faris.
And interestingly, when we put this article together for Fate, it went through multiple editings. Paul is a professional writer. It was good to start with. And we went through it by probably at least 4 different people. And when it came back from the printer, there was some real unusual information that wasn't where it was supposed to be. It was repeated twice, and it absolutely should not have been there.
In the magazine article I wrote for that issue of Fate, a series of typographical errors appeared with the same words repeated again and again out of context. The blackout in 2 levels of opacity of 4 words in my document. Blacked out words are spoke to Joe Amode. The blackout in 2 levels of opacity of 4 words in my document. Blacked out words are spoke to Joe Amode.
We have no idea how it magically appeared on the page in the printed magazine. We are usually very, very careful in editing and proofreading the magazine, so it was really bizarre when this was called to our attention.
These typos showed up right in the middle of the name, L.J. Dopp, the artist who painted the painting that predicted the exact time of Fari's death.
It was nothing that we did. We didn't put it there. It just appeared in the print issue, and thousands of people read this unusual, out-of-context information.
How is it that in this article suddenly appears, after 4 people have proofread it, the double reference to the ink blot in my document of the 2 levels of blackness in the document? It makes no sense. It makes no sense. It really seems like him, which left me feeling like, all right, maybe not only is there an afterlife, but like Arthur Conan Doyle believed, maybe there is preservation of the actual personality in that afterlife, including the sense of humor.
I usually, in most of my experiments, have had 6, 8, or 10 witnesses, all of whom have seen and heard the same things that I have done. Gradually, I became more and more convinced on the matter as I studied year in, year out, but it was only in the time of the war, when all these splendid young fellows were disappearing from our view, the whole world was saying, well, what's become of them? Where are they? What are they doing now? Have they dissipated into nothing? Or are they still the grand fellows that we used to know? It was only at that time that I realized the overpowering importance to the human race of knowing more about this matter.
I was initially contacted by Paul Davids to come in and help out with the music as a music supervisor. While editing, Paul Davids' wife Hollis came out to visit us over the weekend and brought some wine for us to enjoy in the evening. And the bottle that she happened to bring is this bottle. It's a very sort of limited vintage wine, somewhat uncommon. It's also the wine that I chose to serve at my wedding back in 2004. And the date on this bottle, as you can see, is 2004. It's also worth noting that there were 7 people present at my wedding, and one of those people was Forrest J. Ackerman. Neither Paul nor Hollis could have had any idea that this wine had any tie to me and that it would have any further tie to Forrest J. Ackerman, again being one of the few people at my wedding. The circumstances of this particular vintage finding its way to me are so unlikely that even a skeptic like me has to go, As a further note of connectivity or background, Joe Mo, he and I are longtime close friends, lifelong friends, and we met when we both lived in Hawaii as children. It's just an odd coincidence how the Acker thread sort of has woven through both of our lives and ties us together to him, apparently even beyond.
Little over 100 years ago, there were no airplanes. And although people dreamed about flying for thousands of years, we didn't know it was possible. And many people, as you know, lost their lives trying to fly. But on one fateful day, I think it was 1903, December, there were 4 flights that day. The first one lasted all of 12 seconds. The longest may have been 59 seconds. The second day, they tried to replicate it. They couldn't replicate it the second day because there wasn't enough breeze. They replicated it on the third day. Although most people didn't believe that this happened, for those people who witnessed it, they now knew that flight was possible. Could we have imagined then that within a few short generations, there'd be these gigantic machines carrying hundreds of people, traveling hundreds of miles an hour, faster than any animal had ever flown, all over the world, 24/7. And most amazingly, could we have imagined that everyone would take all of this for granted? Well, I think we are at a similar moment in history. It is no longer a question of, is it possible to detect the presence of spirit? Not when you know the published data. The question is, can we imagine what this is going to be? And most amazingly, can we imagine how soon it's going to be where all of us take it for granted that we can communicate with the other side?
So as soon as something turns out to be true and we have a natural explanation for it, it's no longer part of the supernatural, right? Like the weather, understanding of storms and lightning and so on. We took all that out of the hands of the witch doctor and the paranormalists and the supernaturalists and just made it part of the normal natural world. And that would be the case were it true that somehow consciousness survives death or the soul or something like that. So let's say, for example, it turns out that there is a soul, it's a pattern of information, it's stored quantum mechanically through some kind of quantum physics effect, and that pattern continues on beyond the physical body. Well, that wouldn't be the paranormal anymore or the supernatural, right? It would just be part of quantum physics, and it turns out we get to live forever, our patterns are stored in this energy field, and now that's just, like chapter 18 in your physics book. It's just part of science.
There are many stories of near-death experience. That's when someone appears to be clinically dead, and a while later they're breathing and talking again.
On a Wednesday afternoon during a thunderstorm, I was struck by lightning. And it hit me in the side of the head and it went down my spine, welded the nails of the heels to the floor, it threw me in the air, suspended me in the air. I'm on fire. I'm like drinking gasoline. I'm burning. I can't acclimate. And there was a ball of fire that came through the room that burnt my eyes. So they took me to the University Hospital. They get me in there, and the emergency room paper says, patient unconscious, patient not breathing, no EKG. Somewhere around dead for 28 minutes. All of a sudden, in the hubbub of watching everybody working on my body and all the stuff that's going on, I hear these chimes, and I feel myself being pulled down this tunnel, and I look up at it, and it's moving whether I'm moving or not. When you see your life pass before you in a 360-degree panorama, and you realize you've missed nothing, it was like the whole personality that was Daniel disappeared. He was gone, and that whole life only was like a speck of dust in the fabric of reality. And then this being started taking me to these crystal cities. And when I started into this crystal city, that being disappeared. And either the being just left me or it merged with me. But I think it merged because I had a higher awareness. And I came into this place that had sound and this beautiful harmony to it. But they told me I had to come back. And I was trying to figure out, how do you get back into your body? I mean, I knew I had to find me. They said you have to go back. I knew I had to find me, okay? And I had to figure out how to get back into me. My mind is thinking that. I'm back being Daniel, and my mind is thinking that. And I see this body covered with a sheet with paperwork on my feet. And I knew it was me, and I didn't know how to get back in it. I began to feel the feeling of Tommy, this friend I have now for 50 years. And he was on the other end of the phone coming. I could feel his grief that he had lost me. I could feel it. And all of a sudden, I'm back in that body. I can feel the pain, and I can't move, and I can't scream, and I can't do anything. And I can remember blowing the sheet. And it was Tommy or one of the guys standing in the room that said, hey, wait a minute. And they pulled me out, and they took me back in, and whatever it was they were doing got me to where I was stable. There wasn't any more wondering about whether there was a life after death or whether that there was potential and that we were spiritual beings and all of that stuff. That stuff just went away one day. And my life started then. I became a hospice volunteer because, number one, I knew something that most people didn't know. There's a life after death. And I could make a difference in their life by listening without any preconceived notions that's based on faith. I don't have to have that.
What about mediums and people who claim to see the dead? We've heard many of them are fakes who try to deceive us. Are any of them for real?
Yeah, Glenys Mackay is a very interesting psychic. I think she's the most powerful psychic I've ever met, and I've met quite a few. Glenys and I and Anne and her husband were in a car driving up to go to dinner one night, and we were talking about seeing the dead, and she said, oh, I see the dead all the time. I said, well, I was driving along. I said, do you see the dead now? She said, yes, if you want me to, I could. I said, sure. See if there are any dead around me, thinking this will be really funny. And so she says, yes, there is somebody. And she said, I see him, he's connected with music. I was thinking, who could that be? I have no idea. And she said, he plays the piano. No, she said, he plays the violin. The violin. And then she said, he's wearing a tuxedo. And Glenys, she names names. She's not vague, and she doesn't draw things out of you. I'm just sitting there driving, I haven't said a word. And then suddenly she says, his name is Milton. And this floored me. This was the most incredible psychic hit I've ever known in my life, and here's why. When I was a little boy, living in San Antonio, Texas, across the street, a much older boy lived. He was at least 7 or 8, maybe more years older than I. And he played the violin. He played the Beethoven violin concerto every night, night after night. And his name was Milton Ryan. Mitty Ryan.
And that's where Whitley got his love of classical music.
That's where I got my love of classical music. I had not, and he wore a tuxedo because he became a musician in the symphony orchestra. He's dead now. He's been dead for years. I had not thought of him since I was 20 years old or before. I moved out of the neighborhood, I forgot about it. And then she brings this up. It's not possible she even pulled it out of my mind somewhere. It wasn't in my mind. That, to me, is the strongest proof of the persistence of the dead that I can possibly imagine.
This is the document that was altered.
Did he have a stroke before he passed over?
Yeah.
Because the first thing I do, I'm picking up a stroke. I'm also picking up a lot of laughter. I get the strong feeling that that he did have a sense of humour, but he was a mischievous soul. And I guess he played jokes on people, because I feel he's playing jokes around you now. He's chuckling because it's like you want your logic mind. The logic minds come in. There's nothing logic about this. This man's in spirit and he's trying to be communicating. He's having a lot of fun.
How could he have even found me? I was in Santa Fe. He knew me here in California.
Yeah, but hang on.
He's gone.
You put the thought out there. As soon as you think of somebody, you draw them to you. Example. You're sitting here and you're thinking of, say I'll make up a name, Molly Brown. And Molly Brown knows you and she's thinking of you. And all things, she picks up the phone and rings you. Right? And you say to her, I was just thinking about you. And you rang. Where do you think that came from? You sent that telepathic message out there. You're thinking about it. The same with the spirit world. You think about somebody long enough and you grieve for them or you're thinking about them or you have a possession of theirs, of course they're around you. They come to you. Was there also somebody they used to call Daisy?
You know, it's interesting, one of the, even to Paul, who's putting the pieces together, one of the disconnects was during one of the readings of the mediums that he consulted, the name Daisy came up. And it meant nothing to him. And it was funny that that missing link even came to mean something when he told me about it, because I knew Daisy was Forey's, housekeeper of 16 years. It says, Joey, my best buddy, gratefully, Forey, 2008.
When Daisy abruptly gave notice, her room opened up, and that's when Jomo moved in the Acker Mansion and became a principal caregiver for Forey for so many years.
Look, there's many ways that people have communication. It can happen through a dream. It can happen through a medium.
There are countless stories of people reporting that after someone that they've dearly loved has died, that a whole host of electronic and other kinds of physical anomalies occur, where computers will be turned on, where messages might be picked up, all kinds of creative and strange occurrences. You always have to determine, is the person an accurate observer? Have these things really occurred? How frequently are they occurring? Are they simply because they're wanting to believe that there's life after death, that their loved one is coming to them, they're ascribing meaning to these random events? Or is it in fact the case that indeed some deceased people with some people who are still alive pull out all the stops, do everything in their power to use their energy, their continued intention and energy, to be able to manipulate whatever they can to get their loved one's attention, to let them know that they're still here. Mediums know that under the rigid conditions of our research, that if they're frauds, and we discover that you're cheating, we will expose them. They also know that given these rigid experimental conditions, that if they're not very good at this or they're very nervous about this, they're just going to fail. And we'll share that too. So typically the kind of people who come to us are only people who feel that they have a gift and they care enough to either want to contribute to the research or to have themselves be validated by credible science, that they're willing to, quote, sit in the hot seat and be tested. And most gifted mediums tell us that what they're doing is they're detecting, they're sensing, they're responding to, they're receiving the energy of people who have passed and the information associated with it.
Dr. Schwartz had worked with many mediums in his investigation of life after death, and he had decided to introduce me to one of the best of them, Catherine Yunt.
You there? Yeah. Oh, good. All right. You know that I've called you early this morning about the possibility of your doing a reading at 2. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Dr. Schwartz set up an appointment for us to go over and see the medium at her home in Tucson, nearby.
Catherine, today is July 14th, is that correct?
Yes.
2009. We are in your house, and we're doing an informal and unanticipated reading, where you are, as typically the case,
In the dark.
in the dark about the information, right?
Yes.
Could you just repeat on camera what it is that I've told you thus far about this reading and also how it happened?
Virtually nothing, except that you would be coming to my home at a particular time if that was agreeable, and that there would be a gentleman with a camera.
Okay. There is a specific person that is a preference that the sitter hear from. This person is a male.
Sometimes names are how the connection's made.
I understand. And if it turns out you want that, I'll be happy to give that, because I don't think you'll know much anything.
I know nothing.
I don't see a reason to withhold it, really.
Okay.
Just the first name.
Okay. His first name is Forrest.
At the beginning of her readings, Catherine would hear rather than see her subjects, like a spoken communication inside the inner mind.
I want to say Forrest is here, and Forrest has, again, sort of a bit of a sense of humor, because he's saying to me, and he's making fun of the fact I don't have sight, because he's saying you can't see the forest for the trees, and then he's laughing. I feel like he has more than a wry sense of humor, sort of a kind of poke you kind of sense of humor, just to get a rise out of you kind of thing. Well, just this music, again, is something I'm not familiar with, but it has sort of that Congo beat, I would call it.
Did he say Congo to you?
Well, he just puts in thoughts that I blurt out.
I understand.
And I don't know what they mean or why I'm saying them.
I found in Famous Monsters a reference to the White Witch Doctor of the Congo, Kongo. For Fari, the very word Congo was just another variation of King Kong.
Prankster isn't the right word, but kind of goads you into things, or like play on words.
Well, Forey was the master of wordplay.
He was never afraid to make the worst puns, and he was never afraid to actually repeat them many, many times. Karlofornia, you know. Karloff. It's like classic. He put that on as like stationery.
And I'm sure he's quite happy to be buried in the Forest Lawn Cemetery.
He gets buried there just for the joke.
Jokester, that might be a better word. He's a little funny. I mean, he is witty, but he's also a little pokey. You know, pokes at you. So he's trying to poke you and make you laugh. He says you're way too serious. Why is he showing me giraffes?
What?
Giraffes.
What about giraffes?
I don't know, he's showing me giraffes. Big long necks. Big long necks.
He had the Brontosaurus model, the original Brontosaurus model for King Kong in his house, and it was like all beat up, and it had you know, the long neck.
What's the other thing? Oh, something about his middle name. He's talking about his middle name. Do you know what his middle name is?
Oh, that's you're hitting some strong territory here.
I don't know. He's just saying that's what's unusual, or that's how you know him, or there's something significant about his middle name.
There's a picture of Forey as a child, right? And it says Forrest Clark Ackerman, and Forey actually wrote on it.
This is me before I was Forrest J. Ackerman. He wrote that below the photo.
So he knew damn well his name wasn't Clark.
Well, this should settle the middle name. His birth certificate, James, and Forrest spelled with one R. I guess the other R came along later. When he signed his name Forrest J. Ackerman, he never, ever put a period after the J. He said, "My name is Forrest J. No period Ackerman." We didn't know why, but it was certainly something else unusual about his middle name.
And he furrows his brows when he does that. Like,
what did you?
Furrows his brow.
He furrows his brow?
Mm-hmm. But sort of mimicking, you know, like.
So what was he?
Did he do like mime kind of things? I mean, real animated expressions? Because he's like, now he's raising his eyebrows.
100%. A number of psychics were consulted in the course of this investigation. One of the psychics came all the way from Israel to participate.
We are in a hotel suite in Tucson. We're with Orit to have an exploratory session.
My full name is Ish Yemini Tomer Orit.
I'm Psyche, I work in 20 years, and I'm living in Israel.
There's a particular male
Yeah, okay,
who
okay.
we would like to invite in.
I believe that his name, it's from Hebrew to English, it will be F or P is his name. This is the man that you're looking for.
But you heard an F sounding.
In Hebrew it's one letter. In English it can be a F or a P. Sorry, this is
that.
my problem because I
No
read
problem.
it in Hebrew.
That's fine, that's good. What I would like him to do is to share with him, with you, whatever he can before I ask specific questions.
Something very strange about his laughing. He will laugh about things that people don't laugh about it. I will cry, he will laugh. You know, there's something strange.
She was going to look for a translation of the strange humor.
Distorted.
Distorted.
Yeah.
A direct hit, an accurate focus on his unusual sense of humor. What kind of books did he like?
It's funny. It look like you read science fiction.
Again, another direct score. Well, tell me about his childhood.
He was strange when he was a child also.
Strange when he was a child.
Yeah.
Yes, he was strange when he was a child. So strange that his parents had him raised by his grandparents.
Teenager was exciting of him. They was like, wow, איך אומרים העריצו? Admire him. It was like they going after his belief. You know, like the Hamling, this is the way that I see it.
The Pied Piper.
Yeah.
He was certainly a Pied Piper to me, and thousands of others who wanted to follow him into his worlds of strange fantasy.
There was parents that frightened when the children go after him. It's strange. They have a feeling like they're going to lose them. That nothing will be the same that it was before they're going after him.
Another direct hit. How my parents feared my going after him.
They changing the decoration in the room, the children. It reminded me when I was very young. I liked the Bee Gees. All my room was with the Bee Gees, but something strange. It's not like they liking a pop star. It's something strange. Who would love him was like a publisher. It's book again.
Publisher.
Yeah, there is money from book. Money for book. For something that he's right. That was his successful business, let's say.
It was all about the written word. Anthologies, collections of strange stories.
No, they have a special magazine.
There's a special magazine?
Yeah. Like you have the Time magazine. I don't know what else magazine. It's a special magazine.
Tell me more about that special magazine.
There is the F in the letter, maybe O. It's funny. This magazine he didn't do for money. He do because what he believes that he want people will know.
So he...
Like a mission.
And how did she come up with that?
I don't know, maybe I have a few collection, but one of them was like miniatures. Strange one. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
You have plenty of them. You know, in Star Wars there is Yoda. So this is one of the images that I can see very clearly. That's what, yeah. A dream of every child. So many small dolls.
She called them dolls. She didn't inhabit the realm of creatures and monsters, but the accuracy was extraordinary.
His excitement was like a child. This is maybe the idea. Every time that he understands something, he was like a child. Because in the other side, he was a very serious person.
That was one of the best descriptions of Forrest. He was always the child, the excited child who refused to grow up, a sort of Peter Pan, and yet, at the same time, serious, given to scholarship of a very specialized kind.
Would you say that we're talking about a man when he was alive, who, for example, would he have been a Catholic? Would he have been Jewish? Would he have been a spiritual, skeptic?
Okay. Whatever he was born, I don't care. It was like he's atheist. It was like he got to be atheist.
Atheist.
Yes.
And how could she possibly have fathomed that he was an atheist when he was alive? The accuracy was so precise, it was as though
he were standing over her shoulder, whispering to her.
And what does he think now?
That it's bigger than what that he thought when he was in life. He said it and he's laughing.
Mm-hmm.
It's much more bigger than he ever dreamed about it.
Can you tell me about women, his relationship?
There is a woman. I saw her from the beginning.
Do you
I
have
saw,
a sense?
I saw that it was his wife. I don't know the connection over there. But from all the channeling, I see women that know almost everything.
About him?
Yeah. I saw her from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Forey spent most of his life married to Wendane. And in fact, he made that name up for her. Forey names a lot of people. She really loved Forey and loved what he did.
I'm not sure if she have M or N in her name, because in Hebrew it's the same also.
I was unable to confirm for over a month what her actual name was, whether there was an M. I finally found it in an obscure, lost archive. Her actual name was Matilda, or Malka. I discovered she was also called Mondel. 3 different versions of her original name, all beginning with M. Never saw this published anywhere.
She is the only clear image that I saw when we asked if they have a lot of who is closer to him. She is the only one that was clear to me. I don't know if I can ask him another more question.
One more word to ask him. The ink.
The ink.
Like from a fountain pen.
Like a fountain pen, ink.
Dark
Okay.
ink.
What do you want to know about the ink? Why tell me it's mine?
Why did it appear?
You say it's mine. It's me. It's mine.
Professor William James from Harvard University had a quote, which was, "In order to disprove the law that all crows are black, you need only find one white crow." And whether it's in mediumship research or now with other evidence of the formerly physical beings coming through, what we're looking for are, quote, white crows. In my opinion, Forrest is a, quote, white crow. He is showing that this is possible, but he is not alone.
Almost everyone has a story from their family, loved ones who've passed. Ghost stories started dropping into my lap like coconuts falling off of a palm tree. Some of them sort of hit me on the head, like the one about Lynn Katai, a medical doctor in Phoenix.
Some anomalous occurrences happened after my mom's passing, and she was an incredible human being, one of the most special people that I have ever met in my life. She could move mountains. She went through nursing school in a wheelchair with crippling juvenile arthritis and became head nurse of the premature nursery at Albert Einstein Hospital in Philadelphia.
10 years to the day after her mother's passing, her son decided to get a cat just like the one they'd used to have. And when they found just the right Siamese cat, he took quite a few pictures of it with an iZone Polaroid camera. This is a camera that cannot take a double exposure. You have to peel out each little shot as soon as you've taken it.
This is strip number 5. It was in the middle of the roll, and all the other pictures were of a normal kitten hopping around. And when I enlarged it, lo and behold, not only is there a hand, you can see that there's an arm very clearly with a hand in front of the kitten's face. And what really was startling was that there was also another arm behind the kitten with a hand cupping the kitten from behind. If you take a look at the way these hands are cupping the kitten, and then you look at my mom holding the preemie baby, it is so similar. And not only can you see through the hand, but this hand is very reminiscent of my mom's. She had rheumatoid arthritis, juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, and did have deformities in her extremities. She has like a little deformity here. I mean, anybody that knows about arthritis, this is an arthritic hand. And everyone that knew my mom that saw this picture, as soon as they saw us, said, "Oh my goodness, that's Ruth's hand."
Then there was the ghost story from Rhonda Eklund Schwartz. When her mother passed away, Rhonda's biggest problem was an insurance policy. It was nowhere in the house, and the insurance company had no record of it at all.
I had gone through all the drawers, all the paperwork, all the files in her
her entire home to see if I could find these papers. And I couldn't find them. And I had practically turned the house upside down, but I did know that it existed because she'd showed it to me. So I called the employer, and they said that they had no record of this document. They had nothing that would indicate that this was supposed to pass to me if my mom passed on. And so what I did was to stand in the middle of her living room and just talk to her as if she were there still in body. And I said, Mom, I know that you know where those papers are. And in my head, I heard my mom say, because it was in the first person, she said, go into my office, and in the closet, on the floor, behind Dad's folded flag, you'll find those papers. I remember reaching for the doorknob and slowly easing the door open and having light flood this tiny space. And I could see my dad's folded flag on the floor, like she said, and curling up from behind it, I could see some loose sheets of paper. And I reached down, it felt almost like it was slow motion, and I picked up those papers, and that's exactly what those were.
One of the most fascinating fields of afterlife research is called ITC. That's short for Instrumental Transcommunication. ITC implies that spirits can use technology from their world to make contact with us through our technology.
Which involves spirit coming into a dense form to where they can actually manipulate matter on Earth. They can not only turn on our computers and work with our telephones, but sometimes they can cause items from spirit to manifest in our world. They can manipulate a piece of paper with text. They can manipulate photographs, a roll of film and a camera. There seems to be no limit to what a dedicated, capable team of spirit can do to get our attention to physical phenomena.
People sometimes claim that they receive audio evidence of spirit communication. That's called EVP, or Electronic Voice Phenomena.
I began to talk to researchers in the afterlife in different countries, especially in Europe, where they were claiming to be in contact with people on the other side through telephones and radios and computers. Well, I went to Europe, visited the researchers, and what I found really changed my life. It convinced me that what they were doing was legitimate, and they were definitely in contact with something. And the more I got to know them and their spirit group, the more I became convinced that they were in contact with departed loved ones, departed colleagues, sometimes strangers, sometimes people from history, who were working together on the other side in a group with the aim of opening communication channels with our world.
When we did our interview with Mark Macy, I heard from the cameraman afterwards that one of the cameras had acted up, that there were all kinds of anomalies over Mark's face and across part of the tape, and he felt that this was due to a camera overheating. I accepted that at first, but we had two cameras on the set, and as I analyzed the footage, both cameras produced evidence of those same anomalies when we filmed Mark Macy, a man who feels he has received phone calls from deceased persons.
When spirit comes through the equipment, they don't really come through the physical equipment. They come through the electromagnetic energies surrounding the equipment.
We were way out in the sticks, about 10 miles from Boulder, Colorado. There was nothing there to cause this effect, and the same two cameras had been used for 3 other interviews during the day.
Spirit is not somewhere off in the distance, it's right here all around us, like radio signals. I mean, we know that this room is filled with radio signals because if we have a radio, we can tune to each signal separately. They're all here jumbled together in the same space, but each signal remains distinct. And the spirit worlds are the same way. They're all right here, all around us. And they're separated not by distance, but by vibrations, just like radio waves. So if we had the right frame of mind through meditation or prayer, or someday if we have the right equipment, we'll be able to tune to each of those different realities, those different universes separately and communicate. That's what ITC is all about. We develop these blinders that kind of keep us locked in on the physical world. Our 5 senses are limited. The term veil was coined because all the worlds of spirit seem to be just outside of our view, as though behind a veil of some kind. And sometimes we can pull the veil back and get a glimpse of what's on the other side. For example, through our dreams, we might be able to see a loved one come into our room and talk to us, but as soon as we wake up, it's gone.
One evening toward the end of filming, I was thinking about this at night, and I thought, just for fun, I'm going to give me a sign. I threw out something that I thought would never occur and playfully called out to Forey. I said, just on the off chance that you are out there and that you found a way to affect things and you're having fun, said, you like creepy, crawly, spooky things. So I said, how about a spider bite? That would be something unlikely. I mean, I'd been bitten only once in my life, and that was more than 10 years ago. So I thought, there's something that's not going to happen. Well, the next morning I woke up without a spider bite, but within an hour of filming, I went into the bathroom, and there was a very large daddy longlegs in the sink. He was about double the size of a normal daddy longlegs. And initially, I didn't even bring this to Paul's attention because I just thought, that's odd. So I forgot about it. I came back an hour later, and he was still sitting in the sink exactly where he had been before. So at this point, I finally called Paul. I said, take a look. I told him the story, which I had not shared before. And the very next day, midday, I was walking around and my arm felt a little itchy. I'd been sort of scratching it, and I rolled up my shirt sleeve, and the strangest thing greeted me. I had not one but 2 insect bites that look very much like spider bites. There are no mosquitoes around at this time. It's not the season for it, and it's the craziest thing. It's not 1 but 2.
At the Ackerman estate auction, one of the prize items was the ring gifted to him by Bela Lugosi, who wore it as Dracula in his performance in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. Expected to fetch $20,000 to $30,000. The ring, in fact, was sold for $40,000 at the auction. Over a year later, Canadian filmmaker Mike McDonald, who had rapped on Forey's script, took a stroll about 2 blocks from the home on Creighton Street in Halifax, Canada, where he lived. There, in the window of the eye-level gallery, he saw Forey Ackerman's Bela Lugosi ring. It was on display only for one day, perched on the pinky of a sculpture of the hand of actor Boris Frankenstein Karloff. What a journey the ring had made. It's almost 4,000 miles to end up a few hundred feet from the doorstep of a filmmaker who had documented Ackerman's life.
You don't just say, oh, wow, look at what happened. You examine it all in detail, and then if all that examination of detail does not result in any kind of explanation scientifically, you have to move on from that. And that's what a lot of scientists don't do. They don't bother with that. Unless they're big enough to say, oh yeah, there's something bigger going on here.
You knew Forrest J. Ackerman.
Sure, very well.
He wrote about you a lot.
Yeah, no, he was very nice to me. I mean, I was surprised to find out that he didn't believe in any of these things, but he was open-minded enough, I think, so that even after he passed on and found out he was wrong, he decided to immediately do something practical to let you know that he agreed with you now.
That's what I felt.
Yeah, I think so too.
Basically, I'm a chemist, and I've been a chemist my whole life. I've been practicing chemistry over 30 years. And when you learn science, you learn to be skeptical of things. You learn to require data and evidence in order to make statements and conclusions that you can rely on. That's what I've always been trained, and it's especially important in forensic chemistry and forensic science. You don't go into a court and make statements that you can't back up with data and with analysis and careful observations. But that's not to say that sometimes you see things, sometimes you encounter things that provide data and information, but not explanation, that you can't explain them. Sometimes there are circumstances which simply can't be explained by your 5 senses or by all of the tools of science. And I think there's some aspects of that in this situation that give one pause. I would say disturbing a bit, only because I'm a scientist, but some things have happened to myself and to John Allison that don't fit into that nice, neat pattern of here's data, here's an explanation.
It was an interesting time. We thought about different scenarios, how the obliteration could have occurred. We've tried everything from spit to turpentine to try to recreate your obliteration, and we have gone through hundreds of pages of paper experimenting with possibilities. We were not able to recreate the amazingly homogeneous obliteration that you see on the first page of your document. We spent hundreds of hours of research time trying to do it. So it remains a mystery to us.
I don't know how to explain it. It's a long jump for me to go from molecules to someone from beyond, but I can't rule that out.
And
I can't rule it out.
About 2.5 years after the obliteration of my document, I came across, among archives that I had acquired at the auction of Forrest J. Ackerman estate, an excellent example that showed that kind of opaquing a word was a style that Fari used in editing. He crossed out the misspelling of Janet Leigh's last name, and the cross-out using red ink almost completely obliterates the word and is very neatly, precisely done, just targeting that word. It's a perfect match.
Conducting research using state-of-the-art technology, devices, for example, that could detect super low levels of light in pitch black, to be able to detect the actual energy and presence of spirit under controlled conditions, the kinds of conditions that meet the highest standard of scientific research. When we do controlled experiments with mediums and with people whose loved ones have passed, it goes through Human Subject Committee, what's called IRB, Internal Review Boards. They have to approve all the protocols, and we follow it to the letter. However, one of the great advantages of doing research with technology is that there's nobody to get human subject approval for, because there are no, quote, human subjects involved. We've just got people in the lab working with equipment and getting information from the other side. In a series of experiments now published in peer-reviewed scientific journals, we have data documenting that specific spirits can be invited into the laboratory and be present at particular spirit invitation trials, that they generate increased measurable effects on light. You can't use this for communication, you can only use this for verification and detection. The photomultiplier, or the magnetic sensors, or the radiation sensors, or other sensors that we're exploring, they can operate in real time. The conclusion that I have come to is that any super-sensitive technology can potentially be used for at least yes-no indication of apparent spirit effects. This is the system that is designed to record single photons of light in pitch black. And it's essentially a box within a box within a box. The sensor's in here. Spirit has to be able to go through the different layers of the box and eventually then produce or just release photons, which will then be picked up by the sensor. Now, for the record, how does a spirit get into the room in the first place? They have to be able to pass through what we call material. The sensors that I've been using with the Vernier system measure other properties other than light. It includes magnetic fields, electrical fields, radiation, temperature, and then I started applying it to the unique applications of designing software that could be used for the online detection of yeses and nos and criterion patterns and displaying it in real time. The sensor that we used for the initial apparent appearance of forest was this sensor here. Look at this. It just went off the charts up top. I have a graph. It goes, there's 1, 2, 3, and a 4. And I jokingly sometimes refer to them as singles, doubles, triples, and home runs, okay, because it's just a simple language. And you will, maybe 5% of the time, 3% of the time, you'll get a triple. You very rarely see a, quote, home run. And occasionally, it'll go past the 4 counts in a row. And I call that a home run out of a park. About a week or 2 weeks ago, I've got records of all of this. There started to be an anomaly that would occur. And instead of getting a 4 or a 5, there'd be a 20 or a 30 or a 200.
Okay, this is totally extraordinary. It is, I don't know what time, it's 25 after 1 in the morning. I just decided to come in because I was dreaming about synchronicity related to Forrest. I turned it on, the recorder. As soon as I did, you actually saw this gigantic event occurring. That's one of those huge anomalies.
The anomalies were not random. They would occur at special moments.
I woke up having this recurrent repetitive dream about some sort of synchronicity happening with something odd with Paul Davids in Sedona. Oh, there's another anomaly. It happened. I was so hoping we just captured it right now.
The science fiction of today is sometimes the science fact of tomorrow. And that's what the amazing part of what Forrest was all about.
Gary Schwartz speaks to what he calls his Sacred Promise team. His hypothesis, these are 4 specific spirits on the other side.
So I'm now asking the question, is Forrest going to be able to use this technology? Of course, as I was thinking that question, we saw that yes occur at 4240.
He assumes that the spirits can hear him, not only his voice, but his very thoughts.
One of the things that I've done, which is one of the reasons why I think this quote has worked, is I've given them the opportunity to learn how to use the equipment. So it's like learning to play a musical instrument or learning how to type. You have to learn how to interact with this technology.
Forrest, if this is you, have you been practicing with this technology? Yeah, that would be a no. If we gave you permission to use this equipment, are you waiting for an invitation to use this equipment? Okay, now that's a yes. Waiting for an invitation from me, specifically. Okay, no, that's a double yes.
These collaborating spirits, which we affectionately sometimes refer to as departed hypothesized co-investigators, can be invited to come into the laboratory in the middle of the night when no human being is present, where the computer is completely automating the experiment. And then, like phone messages, you come in the next morning and you download the messages, in this case the data, and then they're statistically analyzed.
He asks if Fari Ackerman should be added to the team as correspondent number 5.
Okay, so I'm now saying tonight that I'm personally giving you this permission as long as the team agrees. And I want to make sure that the team agrees with this, but then of course that's implicated. Okay. Wow, look at that. Look what happened at 4500. Like you can see that's a very large energy burst because you see the bars up top.
This is no longer science fiction. This is the cutting edge of science possibility.
It's not going to take practice. Just permission. And as soon as I said, just permission, there was a triple again. That's a second triple.
A 3, or a triple as Gary calls it, is Fari's identifier on this detection system.
There are 4 kinds of evidence that are portrayed in the documentary. There is physical phenomena. That would be like ink appearing or the word Ackerman appearing on a screen.
Slides disappearing.
Slides disappearing, papers falling down. Second category are what we call synchronicities. And synchronicities are unusual occurrences or a pairing of events which are highly improbable, that are seemingly connected to someone who has passed. The wine bottle that appeared, the observation when Sean threw out to Forrest that if it's real, to produce a spider bite, and then he didn't have one but two. Third is apparent communication through mediums. And there have been 3 mediums who have done readings related to Forrest, each of which have provided very compelling evidence that speak to the fact that these mediums are picking up information about Forrest. And the fourth is the newest, which has to do with the use of specially implemented sensitive technology. No one of them by themselves will serve as, quote, proof. But when all 4 of them simultaneously and independently are providing strong evidence consistent with the hypothesis, the combination of all 4, like the corners of a pyramid, all point to the idea of survival of consciousness, and therefore that Forrest is here. There is no other way to explain it.
The surprising thing that happened to me was that I put my cell phone on the mantle and my iPhone fell off the mantle and onto the floor. This has never happened to me before. I know how to put a phone on a shelf so it doesn't fall off. I picked it up, I put it back on the mantle, pushed it back as far as I could, and again, within an hour, I looked up to hear the sound of the phone hitting the floor. Twice it did that. I then moved it onto a lower table right next to the sofa where I was working on my laptop, and it hit the floor a third time. It did have a little damage to it. I wish I could tell Paul that the crack is in the shape of Fari's head. I can't quite tell you that. But it's strange enough, since I was in the room and it happened 3 times, all with the same phone in the space of a few hours one evening. Paul asked me to document it, and I'm happy to provide this report.
The only explanation I have is that Fari Ackerman, deceased, was telling me he spoke to Jomo. And to me, that makes sense.
And he was sending the message that he promised, if I find out anything otherwise, I'll let you guys know.
He said, I'll drop you a line. Does that look like a line to you?
Yeah, he dropped you a line.
Well, goodbye. I'm alive.